Right. So there is a question in the chat box. If I'm writing a paper on an underexplored but practically important topic, and I propose both a new conceptual framework and a novel methodological approaches to study it, does it become too ambitious for a single paper, or is it acceptable to introduce a new topic, theory, and method all at once? It is a good question. You have to judge, I guess, depending on how much information you have and how well you can articulate everything in 10,000 words. Tourism management usually does not have a clear, definite cutoff, say, like some other journals I understand they have, for example, 9,000 words, 10,000 words, you have to cut it down to that before you can submit. We take a more flexible approach, flexible meaning you can go up to maybe 11 or 12,000, but again, it's not the place for you to write a book. It's the readers will appreciate a succinct story, but we do offer a bit of flexibility. But then the question is, okay, proposing a new conceptual framework and a new methodology. Depending on how new you're talking about, new methodology, is it completely new, you're developing a method, or you're using a method that has not been used before in tourism research? Those are two different things. So if it's a completely new methodology, for example, you're developing a new statistical method, a new big data analytical method, you're developing some new computing programming, then probably you should write a methodology paper all by itself. And maybe you can also try to establish the validity of the method by using multiple data sets to show that the method that you developed actually works. And it usually requires multiple testing. If it's truly a novel methodology, then probably you need to write a paper on the methodology first. And then, again, depending on the new conceptual framework, is it completely new? Do you have to use grounded theory to develop something to identify, discover something, or are you simply putting, integrating different existing theories together into a framework that work for your study? If it's a completely new, you're developing something that nobody else have ever thought about, then probably you need a comprehensive literature review to support the conceptual framework that you're trying to develop. And again, that will take probably a paper all by itself. So I guess it depends on the extent of novelty, each one of the components that you have indicated here. So I guess I'm not answering your question directly, but it requires a bit more information to give you a straight answer. But again, like I said, if it's a completely new methodology, nobody has ever used it, not only in the tourism discipline, but in other disciplines as well. You're writing a new computer code, you're doing, something completely new, then obviously you probably will be better off to write a methodology paper first. All right, we have a question in the chat box. I would like to inquire if researching virtual reality has become obsolete with the advent of AI. I don't think so. We still receive some submission on VR. Probably not completely focused on VR. Maybe I mean it's a big topic. You can use VR as a tool. You can use VR as one of the scenarios. You can use VR, in a number of ways. So I don't see that is now becoming obsolete, depending on how you use it, how you address it. And I've seen papers on virtual tourism. I will assume that's part of of VR phenomenon. So no, we still see quite a few submissions actually, touching on the VR tools or platforms or phenomena. As long as you can bring it in a context that's of interest, solving a real life problem, and of course having some theoretical component to interpret the phenomenon that you're investigating. So it's just like any other issues. I don't think it's becoming obsolete. In the chat box is regarding the high AI detection rate during the submission process. I was directly rejected by a journal because my AI detection rate was considered too high. However, the paper was written entirely by me. Since English is not my first language, I use AI for grammar checking and sentence polishing after completing the writing. Despite this, my submission was considered to have too high of an AI rate. I would like to ask how the TM handles submission from authors in this situation, and if the content is written by the author, how should AI be used for polishing and grammar checking? Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not sure which journal use a tool to check AI's similarity rate, AI rate. From my understanding, the current similarity check tools are not very reliable when we're talking about checking AI generated content. For us, we use the similarity check, but it's mostly for duplication from previous published work rather than AI generated content. So I assume other journals using the same system developed by Elsevier having a similar practice. But yeah, so I can't speak for other publisher or other journals, and I understand even like for universities, when students turning assignments, we can use tools to check if the assignment was written by, or for the most part, generated by AI. But I think most of the professors agree those tools are not very reliable. So if it's possible, you may want to communicate with the editor and see which tool that they use. And if there is any chance that you just explain the situation. For tourism management, I don't think we have rejected any paper because of this, because like I said, it's not a very reliable way of knowing whether the paper was generated by AI. We do ask the authors to declare that you have used AI and the extent of, or the ways that you have used AI as part of your research process and also as part of your manuscript preparation. So we do check similarity, but that is with publicly available information. For example, previously published articles, conference proceedings, theses and dissertations, online information. So those are the similarities that we checked. To address the issue, one possible way is if your university or organization has access to tools that can check AI rate, do a check by yourself before you submit. That's what we advise the authors to do a similarity check using one of the common platforms available. Do a check yourself before you submit. Many authors forget to do that. Yes, even though when we write the papers ourselves, sometimes we forget. That we maybe borrow a sentence here, a sentence there. So if you do a check yourself before submission, that could alleviate some of the problems that you may be facing. But yeah, if you have any doubts, or if you feel like your paper is being wrongfully rejected, communicate with the editor and see the reason and the of at least you get to know which part of the paper or how much of an AI generated rate that they're talking about, so that you can improve, right? So the intention, maybe you want to take the perspective of you want to improve rather than to argue for a change of decision. That may be easier for the authors, for the editors to provide you with a response. Right, so the Elsevier policy is provided in the chat box. Right, there's another comment in the chat box that I will become a new graduate student in the fall. Well, congratulations. And I want to continue to engage in tourism research in the future. What do you think I should pay attention to in my follow-up study, or what do you expect from your doctoral student? Well, that's a very good question. I'm glad that you asked that question before you start. I assume you have completed a master's degree or maybe an undergraduate degree with honor, or have done some research already. So what should you pay attention to? I guess depending on your area of interest, obviously you need to stay current with the literature, and definitely you need to learn the research methods well. Whether you're a qualitative researcher, quantitative researcher, I'm sure each one of us have our own strengths and weaknesses. We can't do everything, but it's always good to understand the different methodology, different methodological approaches, because research methods are skills. So the more tools that you have in your toolbox, for example, you learn the basic statistical analysis, you learn, advanced statistical analysis, you learn how to analyze qualitative data. Each one of the different methods that you master, that becomes a tool in your toolbox. So the bigger the toolbox you have, the more problems you will be able to solve. So like if something is broken in your house, you call a technician, and if somebody come here with only one tool, you're gonna say, okay, now what can you do, right? So if somebody brings a big toolbox with everything, then your confidence suddenly increase. For example, this person can fix everything that's broken in my house. So I would say expand your toolbox to learn as many different methodologies as possible. Knowing that you have strengths and weaknesses. Some people are better with words, some people are better with numbers, but develop a basic understanding. At least you understand the different perspectives. So yeah, I would say getting a good solid foundation in methodology, that's absolutely important. And of course, if you want to focus on particularly a disciplinary area, whether it's geography, psychology, economics, management, marketing, consumer behavior, once you decide a particular disciplinary area, then you need to go deep. One thing that we find in many of the journal papers nowadays is authors will cite theories. They may cite 4 or 5 different theories in one paper. However, you get a sense of they don't really understand any of those. They simply cite them to support their argument, but sometimes the reviewers will come back, because the reviewers are experts, right? They will come back and say, this person cited the theory incorrectly, which means they may be, the authors may have just read a paper that cited that theory, and then it was like, okay, that sounds good, that can apply to my study, without really going back to the original publication to really understand the background, the premises, and the context of that theory. So yeah, in addition to having a big toolbox, I would say you dig really deep into a particular discipline that you're interested in, so that you know the work that you do will be solid, and that will increase your confidence of doing research in that particular area as well. So yeah, on the top of my mind, those are the two things that I can think of at the moment, but lots of things for you to do. Right. Another question in the box is, when self-checking the AI rate, what AI rate is considered reasonable? Check the journal guideline. Depending on the journal you want to submit to, for example, for tourism management, we don't, like I said, we don't do AI check rate, but for text similarity, we specify that the maximum is 15% and no one number should be higher than 1%. In other words, your paper should not have more than 1% similarity with any other prior publication, and cumulatively the percentage should be below 15%. If a journal has a specific AI rate requirement, I would assume they will have that published on their website as part of the guide to authors. I think the earlier comment about English is not your native language, therefore you use AI to help with writing. I can understand that, but you're the one eventually responsible for the content created. I tried to use AI earlier on when I think it was last year when the AI was suddenly becoming very, very popular. So I tried that, and I do that paragraph by paragraph. But then at the end, I found that each paragraph seems to have a different writing style. And at the end, that paper is not mine. It completely changed the way I write. So even if you use AI to help you address grammatical issues, you probably need to, I would strongly advise you to go through the paper from the very beginning to the end and make sure it is your style, because each one of us has a different writing style. Maybe AI will give you a quote unquote better way to say things, but that's not the way you say things. So if you use different AI tools to help you do the writing for different papers, then throughout your academic career journey, you will have different writing styles for different papers. That's not very advisable, because you want to establish a reputation for yourself. And when people read your articles, they can say, oh yeah, I know this person write it because you have a style. But if you use the AI tools, then you lose that personal style in your writing. I understand it may be difficult at the beginning, especially for using English as second language, but each one of us has a different style. The way you tell a story will be different from the way I tell a story, and will be different from the way AI tells a story. So yeah, you can use AI as an initial draft, but I would strongly recommend you go through the AI assisted writing, and you correct AI's writing to make sure that the article reflects your personal flair, and it conveys the message that you want to convey. Okay, and that's from a long-term career development perspective, but also that as you change the AI writing, that's going to reduce your AI rate at the same time. Okay. Another question in the box is, how does tourism management evaluate the scholarly merit of practical industry policy-driven research versus theoretical contribution? What frameworks or matrices are used to assess the impact of such applied work, particularly in contexts like mainland China, where real-world problem solving is prioritized? Well, we look at all of them. We don't have a matrix. First, reviewing a journal article is not a science, right? It's a system, and I have to say it's not a perfect system because we have human involved. So for tourism management, we do ask the authors to indicate the so what, because we have an impact statement requirement. Each of the articles needs to come with an impact statement. 150 words is not a whole lot. 150 words. What can this study do for not only the industry? What can the study do for the broader non-academic? Could be environment, social, economic, policy. In other words, what is the non-academic impact of this piece of research? And also you have that practical implication section, usually toward the end of the paper, right? So for tourism management, we do ask for the practical aspect of it. So that needs to be there. So that would include industry and policy aspect. But then, of course, tourism management is positioned as a scholarly journal. Therefore, theoretical contribution, theoretical methodological knowledge contribution is a must, right? We have a special issue on quantitative methods. And for that special issue, obviously, all the papers need to make methodological contribution. In other words, providing something new, offering a better method, offering a better approach to tourism research. So some studies will contribute to theoretical advancement. For example, you identify shortcoming in existing theory. Therefore, based on your study, you can fill that gap, or you contribute novel knowledge. So yeah, so you need to have both that scholarly component and also the practical component. But we don't have a matrix to say 60% on this, 40% of that, or anything like that. The initial desk review, we have 3 layers of desk review. For those of you who are not familiar with how we process the submission, we have the managing editor who will do the first desk review, and then I will do the second desk review, and one of our associate editors will do the third desk review. And after the desk review, we will send the paper out to reviewers. And of course, at each layer of the desk review, desk rejection could happen. But for the papers that pass the 3 layers of desk review, we send the paper out to reviewers. The reviewers are the content experts, and they will let us know the theoretical contribution. Usually, the desk review will be able to tell whether the study actually solved a real life problem, and that's the practical aspect of it. Once you pass that, then of course it's the reviewers who will help us to judge whether the study really develop something new in terms of methods or contribute to theoretical advancement or any novelty in terms of knowledge creation. So that's the process that we go through. Like I said, we have at least 3 layers of desk review, and then 3 additional reviewers involved. So we have 6 people involved before the paper eventually get published. It is not a perfect system, but we do the best we can to get multiple people involved so that the best decisions can be made. So yeah, sorry, I cannot give you a specific answer to the matrix, but we look at all of them. Yeah, so the impact statement definition is provided in the box for your information. Right, the next question is, I want to know that can open online user-generated content social media data be used in research paper without ethical approval now? Any requirement about ethical considerations for social media data, such as Xiaohongshu, Weibo, WeChat, official account, etc.? You need to check with your university institutional review board. Each university has, I assume most or all universities internationally has an internal review mechanism to approve the study. So as long as your study passes the institutional review board process, journals do not ask you to provide additional proof that you have the authority to use the data. From my understanding, as long as it's public information, as long as for example, TripAdvisor, you can prod the data. WeChat official account, if it's public information, openly accessible, then you can use the data. But we rely on institutions to be the gatekeeper because universities have their internal guidelines and have their ethical approval process. They do a much thorough job than the journals can, because we're dealing with a large number of papers submitted each year, and we don't have the resources to check the ethical issues of each and every paper. Last year, we received 2,230 papers. That's probably 5 or 6 papers each day, 365 days a year. So we're the gatekeeper of quality in terms of your research output. However, ethical approval is under the purview of individual institutions. And of course, in the methodology section, sometimes your reviewers will ask for a statement or two on the ethical aspect of the methodology, but that very often comes with qualitative research or research with a special group, for example, with young children, with people with mental disorder. So with some disadvantaged population, reviewers are particularly conscious of the ethical issue, but then the statements provided by the authors is usually we have received institutional approval and we follow the institutional guidelines. And that's all the reviewers ask for, just to make sure that your research has been approved by your university. What do you think of the future of tourism? Wow. Because it's social science and seems to be quite dangerous nowadays. Yeah, I've heard that comment before, but you know, people will always travel. Just like people will always eat, right? Travel is nowadays being considered as a necessity. In the past, it was a luxury, but now it's a necessity. So as long as the phenomenon will continue to exist, there will be interesting studies that needs to be conducted. I understand where you're coming from. Maybe looking at the student enrollment globally, especially after the pandemic. Undergraduates or high school graduates or parents are less willing to send their kids or for young people to study tourism because of the uncertainty of jobs after they graduate. And obviously with the pandemic, people are more interested in studying in health science related, or now with AI computing related. But that would simply make us more interdisciplinary. I think we need to be more interdisciplinary. I don't think tourism will disappear. Tourism research will not disappear, simply because, like I said, everybody now feels like they're entitled to travel. They're entitled to visit other places. That's simply part of who we are nowadays for the most part of the human population. What we need to do is we need to change. We need to change with time. We need to embrace, for example, other discipline. How can we integrate tourism studies with computing? How can we integrate tourism study with medicine, with mental health, with psychology, so that more interdisciplinary studies and interdisciplinary research can be conducted. The phenomenon is there, but the way of approaching the phenomenon needs to be more insightful. So yeah, we need to prepare ourselves for the future and embrace all the changes that's happening. Tourism is already very different from 10, 20, 30 years ago, and it will continue to be different. So I mentioned about the toolbox earlier. In the future, the toolbox will need to include the knowledge, for example, in another discipline, and also maybe some computer programming skills, if that's the area you are interested. So the toolbox will need to be more inclusive in the future, in addition to the traditional qualitative, quantitative studies. And also for the undergraduate, if you're talking about university enrollment, yes, I understand some universities are facing challenges, but then that simply means that we need to, again, revise our curriculum, change our curriculum, change our offering with time to offer joint degrees, for example, with other disciplines to make our students more marketable when they graduate. Right. The next question is in tourism studies, where research typically builds upon mature theoretical paradigms. How can researchers effectively discern whether new contributions contribute to incremental enhancement, enrichment of existing paradigm or transformative paradigm shifting breakthroughs? Yeah, I think most of our research are the first type. We're making incremental enhancements. It's very challenging to have transformative paradigm shifting breakthroughs, and it takes time. It's impossible to do that within one journal articles. It takes time. A paradigm is a way of thinking, right? So a paradigm is a perspective. So you need to have enough of study, enough of articles, enough of people to agree with you to become a paradigm. For one person to say that's a paradigm, that probably doesn't work because paradigm is how you frame your worldview. It would be great if you can, develop something transformatory, publish it in a journal article, but that's only that conceptual piece. What follows up then is you have to prove that the transformative paradigm, if that's how you call it, transformative paradigm that you propose actually works. And that takes empirical studies, multiple empirical studies. Then for each of the empirical studies, then become the first type, which is incremental enrichment of either existing paradigm or the paradigm you're proposing, right? So most of us, if we can do something very focused for a number of years, maybe you can firstly propose something that's really different, accumulate your argument with empirical evidence, and gradually people accept that. And therefore, this is so-and-so's theory or so-and-so's paradigm. But that usually takes 10, 15, 20 years to do. We really see one piece as transformative. We'll be able to offer a transformative paradigm shifting breakthrough in one piece. In the old days, we've seen books that serve that purpose. There could be one psychology book that changed the complete school of psychology. But that's in the old days, right? And where the books were very, very highly respected. Now it's a different environment. So most of the work I see, at least, I have seen, are more on a incremental enhancement. but it's good to have something in your mind if you really want to have something transformative. Very good.
You're talking about embracing new disciplines, right? And this question came to my mind. Recently, I'm working in some behavior sciences projects. We're doing some mega studies, validating some measurements of well-being. It's outside the scope of tourism, but uh, projects like this means that we're going to have 200, 300 researchers in one paper. And you're talking about being open to these disciplines, and this brings to my mind the discussion that they were having on TriNet about the number of authors and people criticizing 6, 7 authors. But we need to break this barrier if we're changing the perspective and embracing new disciplines. And this brings me to the point, what would be the tourism management policy for one paper like this that has 100 authors that usually a person gain an authorship because she was able or he was able to collect the data, transcribe the survey in one specific country. Because I can see that these authorships numbers in tourism, they are still there is this stigma. I was in a round table with Professor Makasha last week, and he was talking about this, and he has this view on the number of authorships increasing, which is totally different from me because, as I told you, I'm working with behavioral sciences, and it's quite normal for us to have several co-authors in one paper.
Yeah, I mean it's a different paradigm. Talk about paradigm shift. It's a different paradigm. And for most of us, or for the tourism researcher community, we're talking about the culture, right? Every community has a different culture, and within the tourism researcher community, we're still looking at authorship as having intellectual contribution. So collecting data is not intellectual contribution. We can outsource data collection. I understand they have access, therefore they're able to provide the data, but I think we're still defining the contribution quite narrowly. And that's what tourism management goes by as well. Each author needs to provide an author statement. I mean, as long as so the purpose of having an author statement is just for all the authors to think, at least please think. If you all agree each and every one of you deserve to be an author, we're not here to judge, right? But yeah, I think the tourism community still look at a large number. You're talking about hundreds, but even if it's over 8 or 9 or 10, people were like, okay, who's the free rider, right? So that's the culture within the tourism community, and we're living in the community. So we don't have any paper that I haven't seen any paper submitted with 20, 30 authors. And we haven't published anything like that. And I did get a question. I can't remember from where, but I think I got an email inquiry asking if a lab can be listed as an author. For example, they have 5 authors, and then the 6th one is XYZ lab. So our answer was no, because then a lab cannot provide an authorship statement. I think I understand in other discipline, the entire lab, if the lab is listed, then every employee within the lab can claim that they have one publication, but that's not common, at least for now, within the tourism discipline. Yeah. Right. The next question is about what skills or knowledge do you think we have to master as a new researcher in tourism research, or what disciplines do you suggest most in future research? That's a very big question. Like I said, the skills are your tools. So I may have a round toolbox, you may have a square toolbox. The basics are qualitative, quantitative methods, how to analyze qualitative data, how to, do the basic statistical analysis. And of course, if you're having an economics background, that answer will be completely different. If you have a computing background, that answer will be different. So yeah, I mean, tourism is really such a big umbrella phenomenon that you can go in any directions, any discipline. My advice is to pick the discipline that you're most interested and go deep. Whether it's psychology, sociology, economic, geography, whatever discipline that you're interested in, go deep. Don't try to do multiple discipline. When we say multidisciplinary, I don't mean each person does multiple disciplinary studies. I mean, we just need to work with other people. So again, with the tools, it's the same thing. Whether you're more, you're better with words, or you're better with numbers, or you're better with computers, you're better with people. The more skills you have, the better. But try to have a solid foundation of methodology. At least you understand the basics of all the methods, and then you specialize in something. That way you understand what other people are talking about, and you can contribute in one or two particular areas. The next question is, which method do you think has the most publishing potential? I don't have an answer for that. We don't decide on the method. Like I said, the journal editors are gatekeepers of quality. It doesn't matter what method you use. What method you use should be based on what questions you have. So you decide on your research question first. How do you decide on the research question? You go out the door, look at what's the problem, right? You need to have a real life problem first. So we go backwards. You go out, find a real life issue that you want to solve. Therefore, you form a research question, and then you find the most suitable method. Rather than method driven, rather than saying, oh, I only do big data, therefore, let me see what data is available and then what question I can form. That's not the way to do it, right? You should find the problem first. You have to have a real life problem or real life phenomenon that you want to describe, right? So you go out, find the problem first, and then form your research question, and then decide what is the best way to solve that problem. And that decides on the method that you use. So we don't have any preferences for any of the methods. We've published qualitative, quantitative, statistical-based economics paper. We've published big data, large language model, really anything. So it's, what do you have in your toolbox, and what problems do you have? The follow-up question is regarding publication trends. Could you share approximate acceptance rates across different subfields in our discipline? Particularly, I'm interested to know which research area currently receive more favorable consideration from journals. Whether it's sustainable tourism, experience economy, smart tourism, or other emerging domains. Any observations about shifting editorial preferences would be tremendously helpful for research planning. Again, that's the I have to apologize because that's the wrong question to ask. Again, we're not the gatekeeper of topic. We're the gatekeeper of quality. We don't have preferences for topics. We publish anything and everything as long as it's of quality. For particular topics, and then you look at the different journals. For example, we have journals specializing in sustainable tourism. We have journals specializing in conventions and events. So those are the obvious topic preferences by those journals. But for tourism management, it's a very broad-based journal. And some other journals can tell you different things, right? There's some journal focusing on destination marketing and management, and obviously only destination marketing and management papers will be accepted. Tourism management, we see tourism as the umbrella industry that includes a number of different industry segments. So we take a very liberal definition of tourism. Anything related to tourism management, we welcome submission. The only criterion for publication is quality. So we don't dictate topics. Of course, we've seen the so-called hot topics come and go, right? We've seen papers coming in, especially in the past year and a half, about AI, Gen AI. Simply because everybody is suddenly interested in Gen AI, but that doesn't mean that's the interest of the journal. That simply reflects the interest of the researchers. Actually, if you have to get an answer, my answer is go contrary to the hot topics. After we've seen 500 Gen AI related articles, it would be nice to see something different, right? So yeah, we don't go with the trend. We simply search for quality, whatever the topic is. And of course, you need to decide based on your interest. Don't do Gen AI research simply because everybody else is doing Gen AI research. You want to do something that you're interested. Because hot topic is hot today, it may get cold tomorrow. Then does that mean you have to change your interest? Does that mean you have to change your disciplinary focus, right? The topic today may require one disciplinary focus, and the hot topic tomorrow may require a completely different set of skills that you have. If you constantly change the topic because of the hotness of the topic, then that means, well, you're going to be very busy learning new tools and studying new disciplinary contents, right? All right, we have another 3-4 minutes left. Okay, the next comment is, does an implicit prestige hierarchy influence tourism research funding opportunity? How can early career researchers with limited institutional support secure external funding? The question seems to suggest that there is that implicit prestige hierarchy in terms of the discipline, starting from psychology, moving down to marketing, moving down to tourism, moving down to leisure studies. I guess that depends on your geographic area. Every country may have a different set of priorities in terms of funding. I'm not sure which region you're from, but I know for us in Hong Kong, for example, the funding agency always look at basic research, always look at implications for Hong Kong in terms of regional economy and anything related to Hong Kong. What does the research can do for Hong Kong? And we have different panels, for example, business panel, humanities panel, medical panel, engineering panel. So within that panel, for example, in this case, psychology and marketing will belong to different panels. And tourism, depending on which disciplinary, some of our colleagues, for example, I will submit to the management business panel that will be in the same panel as marketing, but some of our colleagues who do, for example, they may submit to the engineering panel if they do some sustainability, energy consumption related studies. Yeah, if that's the case in your geographic area, yeah, I know that's a challenge. Maybe you want to work with somebody from psychology, if psychology is really seen as the the top discipline. And also depending on the quality of the proposal, of course, if you know psychology is implicitly favored, then you borrow some of the theories, or you use some terminologies. I would encourage you to seek advice in your area from senior researchers, and to see, I mean, there are some quote unquote tricks, right? There are some do's and don'ts for grants applications. It's a learning process. Yes, I understand it's quite challenging, not only for junior researchers, for senior researchers as well, right? We're running out of time. There are quite a few questions there, and I welcome your participation next month. We'll do this every first week, first Monday of the month. This is really great to have so many questions in the box, right? Yes, we do a quick question. We do like controversial topics. Like I said, we've seen 500 submissions of a similar topic. It will be nice to see something different. But then again, we're not gatekeeping of the content. That's why we see 500 papers, we still process the 500 papers, and we still judge the quality of the 500 papers of a similar topic. But if we see something that's really different, that get us excited. That's all we can do, right? Again, like I said, we're not discriminating topic. We're simply trying to pick the best that we can get to publish in tourism management. And I'm sure all the other journal editors do the same, right? All right, I have to apologize for not being able to answer all the questions that you have today, which is a good thing. I get really excited when I see so many people showed up, and also have so many great questions. Sorry to disappoint you that I cannot answer all the questions that you have, but I do encourage you to come back next month. We will be back here again in May, the first Monday of May. And I guess I will see you then. And I welcome your submission, obviously. Don't get discouraged if your paper get rejected, either desk rejected or peer review rejected. It's part of the learning process. My paper get rejected still on a regular basis. And I do learn from reviewers' comments. So continue to do the good work, and I will see you next month. Thank you very much for joining me today. Have a good evening or good day.